Hello IFL Nation and welcome to this IFL National Championship game preview video. I know this one has been long overdue. Past few days I have spent in Vegas on vacation, and unfortunately the hotel's Wi-Fi and my laptop's hardware weren't exactly operating on the same wavelength, quite literally and figuratively. So had to get super creative just to put the written Wager Wednesday piece out earlier in the week, which that is out there and available. I will link that below in the description for you. But in any event, we are here on the eve of IFL National Championship Day. This will probably get uploaded on Saturday morning for those of you out in the East Coast in the audience. For the West Coast, probably the same deal, but we'll see where today's video winds up going. So, one sec here. There we go, much better. So, last week, we did it. Throw up those deuces because we predicted both conference championship games correctly. That's right, 2-0 in the conference finals for a second consecutive year. Granted, we picked the favorite to win in each one. Not the most impressive path ever, but hey, wins are wins. It wasn't like either team was too heavily favored, but we had some certified classics in that mix as well. So we'll go over both the Eastern and the Western final from the weekend before. Talk about which teams get to play in Tucson either tomorrow or Sunday or whenever you view it. We'll have a chance to take a peek at some 2026 season-long stats, review what was hot, what was not, and pretty much do a full-scale analysis of where our betting was strongest and weakest this season. Once we do all that, we'll go right to the IFL National Championship. We will do a deep dive into the teams, the players, and the trends of note. Look at an inside look at my model, which ran 1,000 simulations of this very game, and then we'll put it all together. We'll make a final selection, and as my bud Cody says, we will get out of here. So, our 1-3 first round result last week needed a strong turnaround here to give us a shot at a plus 500 playoff record for a third consecutive year. Starting with the Eastern Conference Final, which was contested between the Tulsa Oilers and the Green Bay Blizzard. This game represented everything that you would want to see in an arena/indoor football game. There was action on both ends. Neither team felt safe at any point, and what better evidence of that than the 16 total lead changes that we had. It seemed like just the entire game was Tulsa in front, then Green Bay responds, then Tulsa gives a response in return. Very high scoring game. Both Liam Thompson and TJ Edwards, arguably the two best quarterbacks of the 2026 season, gave us a duel for the ages. And in this one, it was a touchdown rush by Caleb Ramsey of the Oilers that gave Tulsa a 3-point lead late in the game. Green Bay trying to come up with either a game-winning touchdown or a game-tying field goal to force overtime. They very nearly mismanaged the clock in a way that would have doomed their season. But they get to the 6-yard line, leave 2 seconds on the clock. The fourth down decision is a field goal attempt from Andrew Mevis. He had already gone 2 for 2 earlier in the night. His third attempt sneaks past the suspending wire supporting the right-hand side of the goalpost. It grazes the back netting. It is declared a good field goal, and that brought us to overtime. The Blizzards' opening possession needed a fourth down clutch play. Liam Thompson scrambles to his right, throws a 5-yard touchdown pass to Isaac Ross. That gave Green Bay a 7-point lead. Tulsa took the ball back, couldn't move anywhere on first, second, or third down, and then on 4th and 10, TJ Edwards, nowhere to throw the football, tries to scramble for the first down, gets knocked short by a couple yards by Andre White. The rush center goes raucous, and the Green Bay Blizzard become the first team in the current IFL conference alignment and playoff format since 2022 to successfully defend a conference title. They are Eastern champions for the second year in a row. An overtime victory, 67-60, against the Tulsa Oilers, that will give them an immediate second crack at lifting the hardware in Tucson. Bound to meet them there, the winner of the Western Conference Final between Arizona and San Diego that took place shortly following the conclusion of the Eastern Final. This one had the first 20-25 minutes or so dictated by both teams' defenses. In the case of Arizona, not necessarily surprising. In the case of San Diego, well, probably not surprising either, but they did start the game with an interception off Max Myler, along with the turnover on downs. Unfortunately, the Strikers could only generate a 3-0 lead from that. They were turned over on downs on their first possession, got a field goal from Ernesto Lacayo the second time around, and then the two teams traded touchdown for touchdown throughout the rest of the second quarter. But the game's momentum was really defined in the last minute of the game. San Diego just made a brutal mistake on play calling late in the half. They, instead of keeping the ball on the ground, chewing away at the clock, they entrust Nate Davis with some passing attempts, and one of which was intercepted by the IFL's interception leader, Yashin McKay. He takes it all the way for a touchdown, completely flipped any sort of positive thinking that San Diego had in this one. The Strike Force really unable to respond from that point onwards. Arizona got the ball back to start the second half, and they built up a lead as large as 21 points. Now, San Diego did trim that down to 6, but they had to get an onside kick recovery as part of that scheme, and in the end, the first 45-50 minutes or so of lackluster offense was too much to overcome. So, out west, it is the Arizona Rattlers for the third time in 6 seasons. Moving on to the IFL National Championship game, this will be their 5th appearance in the IFL's title game in their 9 IFL seasons. They get the victory here in San Diego, which also completes the 3-game series sweep this season, 43-37, the final at Front Wave Arena. So we went with the favored team on both occasions, ended up getting those wins, improving our betting record on favorites to a pretty good 15-7 record. Though, then again, as we'll see a little bit later on, favorites outright has been super chalky this year, to the point where 15-7 might actually be below the ending average here. So, nonetheless, it's still a successful result on the season, 60 wins and 58 losses, with just the IFL National Championship left to preview and predict. So, that's 4 straight winning seasons by bet record, not necessarily by profitability. This will end up being the worst of the 4 seasons so far, but that just gives us a little bit more motivation to turn the tide for 2027. Here are our results by bet type through 118 games, largely dictated, as we've said throughout the late stages of the season, by favorites on the spread and overs. The two, generally speaking, most popular public bets ended up being fairly profitable this season. My estimate would be somewhere between the 2-unit and 4-unit range, depending on what exactly the odds were for each individual bet. Vast majority of those are going to be minus 110, but we also had some minus 105s, minus 115s, small variants like that as well that make the math a tad bit more convoluted, but we can still estimate for the sake of science. Really, the big lean this year, home teams. They won outright 70 out of 114 times. That, bear in mind, that excludes the 4 games that were played in the IFL Cup out in New Jersey. Same deal goes for home teams on the spread, which actually ended up 1 game better. Overall this year, the league's average scoring game, excluding postseason play, was around 87.1, I believe it was. So we had found that 86.5, 87.5 straddle. That ended up resulting, if you look at the population of games this year, in a 10% difference of whether the over or the under cashed. So very, very fascinating trend there. As far as playoff records go, in comparing this season versus seasons prior, favorites so far are, if I recall from memory here, I believe they're now an even 3-3, because we had 2 underdogs outright win, and then we had San Diego fail to cover against Tucson. So yes, that's right. So favorites went 1-3 against the spread in the first round of the playoffs. They go 2-0 with both favorites winning here. So the spread is dead even at 3-3. Over-unders are even at 3-3. So from that lens, this is going to be the deciding game on basically all those fronts. But yeah, we figured that home teams would be fairly strong compared to road teams, just based on the past few years of data. This year pretty much went by any expectation in terms of playing to the average. So that's kind of a snapshot of where all the value lay this season. Our team-by-team trends are here. Interestingly, each of the final 4 teams were 10-6 against the spread in the regular season, with the wins by Arizona and Green Bay. Their total ATS record on the season both improved to 12-6 there. In the case of the over-unders for both those teams, both of Arizona's postseason games have gone under, whereas both of Green Bay's games have gone over. So we've got that situation of unstoppable force and immovable object that we're going to be diving into once we get into the particular matchup preview tonight. And obviously both teams have been exceedingly good on the money line. Arizona having been favored far more often than they have been the underdog. A little less profitable than Green Bay on the money line, all things considered, because Green Bay, in all 3 of the games that they've been the underdog, they have won outright. Their opening win of the season against Vegas, and a pair of victories against the Fisher's Freight as part of that 3-game sample. So if Green Bay is the underdog that we'll see in a little bit, is that something that we possibly consider? The streaks that we'll be looking to possibly identify maybe action on. Arizona's spread streak has now extended to 6 consecutive wins as part of their ongoing 6-game winning streak. As we said before, each of their prior 2 playoff games have gone under, whereas each of Green Bay's past 3 games have made it past the 100-point barrier, in a sequence that has also seen the Blizzard cover in each of their 2 games. Though in both of those cases, it was by 1 score, and you could argue that last week's game required overtime to get past that -3.5 number. So those are our streaks leading into Sunday's matchup. And we get a nice little peek here at our lifetime record updated for last weekend's results, in which we went 2-0, strung together a pretty solid net return of close to 60% ROI. That brings our total ROI for the past 4 years above 2%. We were under that 2% threshold at this time last week, with a bet success rate of 54% and a lifetime net gain of just about 10 units there. So looking to add win 257 to the repertoire here once Sunday's game is all said and done. Our disclaimers for the week, for the final time this season. The series of Wager Wednesday is purely meant for curiosity and entertainment. I'm really here just to discuss the games, the players, try to grow the game in that way. Any predictions or opinions that I spell out are my own. If you would like to try your luck on the IFL National Championship, you must be 21 years of age or older to play in most jurisdictions. And if you do want to tail or fade my selections or come up with some of your own, practice safe gaming habits. That includes setting a budget in terms of both your time and money. Risk only what you can afford to lose. And if you or a loved one is having trouble with problem gaming, I encourage you to look at some online resources for help with that matter. Haveagameplan.org and responsibleplay.org are a couple of the examples issued on a non-sanctioned level on the state side, although respective states also have their own resources as well. Whichever one you refer to, they're great resources for debunking myths, assisting with any questions that you may have. So if problem gaming is something that you're a little bit concerned about, you're not alone, and help is out there. So definitely encourage reaching out if you feel like you need it. With all that said, 16 minutes and change in, we finally get to the IFL National Championship, the 17th version of the IFL's biggest game of the season, Green Bay, Arizona. Let's dig in. We'll start with a snippet of Green Bay, who ended up becoming the league's #1 offense for the second consecutive season, averaging 54 points per game. They got 250 points in all except for one of their home games this season, so incredibly dominant at the Resch Center. So not only have they been putting points up per game in droves, they've also been one of the more efficient teams in the IFL at 50.2 points per 10 possessions, which is second in the IFL. I believe only the Vegas Nighthawks were better in the 16-game regular season this year. In their games this season, in the regular season only, Green Bay's games averaged about 10 3/4 possessions per game, which is right around the middle of the pack. Defensively, a very cursory look at the numbers indicates maybe more of a middle of the park sort of team. 7th in the IFL in points allowed at 42.3. A little bit more positive outlook in terms of efficiency at 40.1 points per 10 possessions, which was 6th in the IFL. On the season, the Blizzard were 13-3. That was good for the #1 overall seed in the Eastern Conference, which, by the way, Green Bay, the first team in the IFL's 5-year-old playoff format, which began in 2022, where the #1 seed made it to the IFL National Championship. They got to this point with pair of shootout wins, 73-59 against the Orlando Pirates, and the recap of the game that we had last week, overtime, 67-60 against the Tulsa Oilers. This is their second consecutive championship appearance. Still looking for that first league banner. And we're talking about a team that was founded nearly 25 years ago, beginning their play in the now defunct AF2. All right, let's talk about some season leaders here. It all begins and ends with the player that was named the IFL's MVP early Friday morning, and that is Liam Thompson, who around this time last year was the backup quarterback of the Bay Area Panthers. He comes over to Green Bay this season, asked to basically replace the production of 2025 MVP Max Myler, who departed in the offseason. A guy that we will also cover in a little bit, spoilers. But focusing back in on Thompson again, he balled out. Over 80 combined touchdowns, 60 plus through the air, 20 plus on the ground. He was efficient. He completed passes consistently. Nearly 5 of his 8 attempts on average went for completions. Took care of the ball, only 6 interceptions. I think only 1, possibly 2 fumbles lost as a rusher. Um, but yeah, Thompson, within the top 5, 6 players in the entire IFL in total rushing production as well. So quite a puzzling player to game plan for opposing defensive coordinators. Um, You'll notice here that we do have Kyrie Robinson listed as far as these stats go, but he was on injured reserve for each of the past couple weeks. I'm unsure of his availability if he is eligible to play in Sunday's championship, but in the event that he is not, Demylon Brown has been a very suitable replacement in that regard. They both share very similar skill sets in terms of their slippery and hard to bring down nature. Brown and Robinson also very close in that touchdown count, as you can see. But yeah, with Thompson's MVP level of play, that's bound to result in a pretty good receiving core. And that's precisely what Green Bay has with guys like Drayshawn Hudson and Trayvon Alexander, the latter of whom has scored 9 touchdowns in just 2 postseason games. He had 5 against Orlando, 4 against Tulsa. Very, very big reason why Green Bay has advanced to this stage for a second consecutive season. We also have Isaac Ross in that fold as well, who ended up catching the game-winning touchdown in last week's overtime victory. So, incredibly good offense, and that's even before mentioning Raheem Anderson at center for Green Bay, who was an All-IFL team honoree. Defensively, Allen Henry, another second-team All-IFL selection, led the team with 5 sacks. Jonathan Ross with 74 tackles, which led the team. And Marcus Hellman was pretty much the turnover-creating machine, the takeaway department for Green Bay. An interception, a couple forced fumbles. He ended up recovering 4 of them, which included a massive one in a late-season game against Orlando that clinched a 2-point win. So you got other guys in that defensive unit as well. Tavon Grant and Andre White among the notable veterans there. And special teams begins and ends with all IFL first-team kicker Andrew Mevis, who's basically booted in at least 1 deuce in each game per average. And assuming that Green Bay keeps up their ways on Sunday, very, very likely to cross the 200-point threshold for the full 2026 campaign, including the postseason. So, absolutely explosive attack and a very, very solid defense with a bunch of players that do have some IFL championship experience. Very, very good reason why Green Bay is 13-3 right now. It is a very loaded lineup. And that lineup will go against the Arizona Rattlers, who have had a really, really good season, almost sneakily, even though they were an 11-5 team this season. They were the 3rd seed in the West, so they have had to chart their path to the championship game exclusively on the road. But in terms of their per-game metrics on both sides of the ball, they also eclipsed 800 points during the regular season. 3rd in the IFL in both per game and per 10 possession scoring, with the per 10 possession mark at 48.3 per 10. Their game tempo was a little bit lighter than that of Green Bay's, 10.44 possessions per game, right around or shade below the league average, which I believe was 10.54. Really the backbone of this championship caliber Arizona team, their defense. Tops in the IFL in terms of allowing points per game, just 579 total, 36.2 a game. And they're 35.1 points per 10 possessions, 2nd in the IFL with only Vegas. Better on a per 10 possession basis. Speaking of Vegas, the 2025 reigning champs met doom at the hands of Arizona in the Western semifinal. And then we talked about last week's Western final. where Arizona won in a game that was, quite frankly, not as close as that final score line suggests. Arizona has been an arena powerhouse, really, since their founding in 1992. They have 5 AFL championships, including 3 consecutive from 2012 to 2014, to pair with their titles in 94 and 97. They also have IFL titles, their first season in the league in 2017, and just a couple years ago in 2024, where they beat Massachusetts in what was the biggest blowout in IFL National Championship history. So, for those of you doing the math at home, Sunday's game is a quest for 8 championships in Arizona's lifetime, scouted across both leagues. So, impressive form that's been fueled by some very, very impressive players. And that starts with Max Myler, the 2025 league MVP, who did his part in leading Green Bay to the championship game last year. Now, Myler came literally blades of turf short on that quarterback sneak in last season's championship that sent Vegas to the league's crown. But Myler's had a bit of a fascinating year. He kind of played second fiddle to Drew Powell in the mid stages of the season, which helps explain a little bit of why his yardage count, along with touchdowns, might be a little bit lighter, is because he didn't really start the full 16 games. I think he got in action on maybe 13 or 14 of the games total. But the efficiency didn't really drop. He still completed the majority of his passes, among the top 3, I believe, in completion percentage. Still got to just about 2,000 yards through the air at this point, along with over 400 rushing yards, and 56 combined touchdowns for the impressive Wisconsin Whitewater product. Arizona this year has fielded a 2 running back attack with Ron Brown and Kamani Clark, combining for over 600 rushing yards and 28 touchdowns on the ground. They have also been equally as lethal through the air with, I believe, a combined 12 touchdowns, along with another 500 or so receiving yards as well. So 2 very well-rounded options there that can easily be rotated in and out as needed based on matchups. Receiving core, very, very good as well, highlighted by first-team All-IFL nominee Arlen Bruce IV, who is just a handful of yards short of breaking the 1,000-yard milestone for the full season. Also leads the team with 19 receiving touchdowns. Rookie Trey Odoms-Dukes, very integral part of this offense, 49 receptions, over 620 yards, with 8 receiving touchdowns. And of course, veteran Corey Reed, also right there as a complimentary option, right around 500 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns. On defense, you've got the player of the year, Yashin McKee, the rookie, notching 12 interceptions this season, along with the fumble recovery, while also leading the Rattlers with 76 tackles. Carl DeCius, who otherwise would definitely get strong consideration for Defensive Player of the Year in almost any other circumstance, very, very capable in his own right, second on the team with 69 tackles and 6 interceptions as well, as part of 30 interceptions that Arizona has had this season, easily top mark in the league. Carson Taylor along the defensive line, along with John Pius. Each of those guys has at least 3 sacks on the season, at least 45 tackles, and of course Carson Taylor with the 3 interceptions as part of his contribution to Arizona's league-leading total. That's not even mentioning other great guys on that in that secondary too, like Jermaine Dobbs, Devontae Merriweather, who is the 2024 IFL Championship MVP. The big injury question mark here to look out for is Hayden Hatcher. Impressive linebacker product, suffered an apparent lower body injury against San Diego. I believe they said it was some sort of ankle problem. Couldn't return to that game at Front Wave Arena. So we'll have to see. Excuse me. We'll have to see what his status is for this upcoming game. But even without Hatcher, still a crazy, crazy good defensive unit. And Matthew Cook, who was the all-rookie IFL kicker this season, very strong leg, 18 deuces, and 166 total points to lead his team in the kicking and point scoring department. So that's a top-down look at your Arizona Rattlers and your top-down look of the Green Bay Blizzard. So ran 1,000 simulations based on my model, which takes into account that point scoring efficiency that we've kind of made a staple of our previews and predictions. So what we wind up getting here, unsurprisingly, is a very close game. One in which the model has Arizona as a very slight favorite, with the average score turning out to be 47-45 in favor of the Rattlers. The model shows a little bit more volatility in Green Bay's point scoring, with a minimum of 25 and a max of 66, compared to Arizona with a slightly narrower range of outcomes, ranging from 28 to 64 points. Out of the 1,000 simulations, we had 542 that were won by the Arizona Rattlers, and the spread that gives as close to a 50-50 shot at winning turned out to be Arizona at -1.5. In terms of the total point scoring per game, we got an average of 91.6 per run, which means that ideal over-under sweet spot number, that 50-50 split, figures to be at around 91.5, where I had the over winning in basically half of those simulations. So if I were to handicap this game myself, I'd say Arizona -1.5, over under 91.5, and be looking at a money line proportion somewhere around like the -120 plus 100, or the -125 plus 105 neighborhood. Probably not any more than that, but that is a little bit of a look at the dispersion there, the numbers that we might expect on a typical run, although as we learned last year, you could run 1,000 simulations of this game and not get a single instance of the actual correct outcome. So all very numbers based and hypothetical here, but it does give a solid idea of what to expect. So that brings us to the game itself. And where we do agree with DraftKings is the spread, with Arizona at -1.5. The over-under that DraftKings set was 94.5, which was actually a field goal higher than what we projected, with that money line right around what we discussed before, Arizona -120, Green Bay +100. So the one thing that we have not brought up yet is some of the history surrounding the IFL National Championship. And unfortunately for those who are hoping for a Green Bay win, there's a lot to go against here. Most notably is that we haven't had an Eastern Conference winner ever in an IFL National Championship game, at least since the restructure and the rebranding for the 2022 season. So out east, we've had this Green Bay team. We had the Mass Pirates in 24, Sioux Falls in 23, Quad City 22. All of those four teams ended up on the wrong side of defeat. As the winners in 2022 were Northern Arizona, 2023 was Bay Area, 2024 was this Arizona team, and 2025, of course, last year was Vegas. So the travel out west for an Eastern Conference team, the struggle can be quite real. Now, obviously, taken with a bit of a grain of salt there, Green Bay was inches away from actually breaking that trend last year. But it is what it is. Eastern teams are 0-4. The other thing going against Green Bay specifically here is this specific matchup against the Arizona Rattlers. They have played 9 times against each other since both teams joined the same league in 2017, I believe it was. Green Bay hasn't won a single one of those yet. Is it finally time where they get it on the 10th try? You know, the old Herb Brooks saying they might beat us 9 out of 10 times, but not this one. Or does history repeat itself with Arizona emerging as champions? And this is a rare situation where looking at the venue of the game actually presents a bit of context here. Arizona, all they have to do is make basically a 2-hour drive down to Tucson from the Phoenix/Glendale area. So they're going to have the travel advantage, to some extent the rest advantage, and they're going to have the advantage of the fans as well. Like, it's not going to be a surprise to me to see a bunch of the arena packed with a pro Rattlers crowd. We kind of saw the same thing play out when the Rattlers played in Vegas a couple years ago. I mean, obviously the fan bases between Arizona and the then Massachusetts Pirates, really no comparison there, but a little bit of an important detail for this one. So even though the game technically is neutral, you kind of have to figure it might be closer to a home game for Arizona than you would otherwise be led to believe. So where are we going with this one? Well, given that I went with the money line favorite specifically in both games last week, I kind of want to vary it up a little bit and not do a money line bet. So the -120 is off the table for us. The +100 is off the table for us. If I had to choose one, I would lean towards Arizona, simply because the 54.2% likelihood of winning that we talked about before presents a little bit more expected value than the +100 on Green Bay. If Green Bay had been set at +110, for example, that probably flips the numbers around a little bit to where maybe I consider that as the higher value play of the two. But I'd lean Arizona -120 is the short of it. As far as the over-under goes, it's set at 94.5 here, but if you prefer Bet365 instead, you can actually buy 4 whole points on this for only a dime more. So if you wanted to bet the under at 98.5, you could do so at -120 over there. And I do like both offenses here, but Arizona's defense has been on another level. And I think that's the difference in whether this over or this under hits. In my mind, the determining factor is, which team do you think is going to win? If you think Arizona is going to win, I'd assert there's a much better chance of the under happening. If you like Green Bay for the quote-unquote upset special, any path to a Blizzard win probably involves the game going over 94.5. So it's a little bit of a snapshot of the over-under there. I would feel relatively comfortable playing the under at either number, though the smarter play would be at Bet365. Take the 98.5 at -120. It's a little bit of an abbreviated price, but I think it would be worth it. You never know if you're going to need those 4 points. So that brings us to the spread. Am I going Arizona -1.5, or do I go Green Bay +1.5? In my pick, Arizona -1.5. If you take a look at this matchup in terms of, player v. player, the situations leading up to this big game, I don't think it could have, played out any better for Arizona. You basically get this game playing in your cousin's backyard, essentially. Whereas Green Bay has to do a cross-country flight, something that they are relatively accustomed to doing fairly recently, because bear in mind they did play in last year's national championship. But the logistics are never easy. You got to cross over time zones, you got to acclimate and everything. So the advantage of kind of those intangibles leading up to the game favoring Arizona. The other thing is actually diving into those, unit versus unit matchups. Green Bay offense versus Arizona defense is going to be the unstoppable force, immovable object that's probably going to be the most fascinating aspect of this game. If you look at Arizona's offense versus Green Bay's defense, that's probably where you make a little bit of that determination that says, okay, maybe Arizona is slightly more well-rounded overall. I think if Arizona's offense was maybe a top 6 rather than a top 3, maybe Green Bay is the favorite in this game. And to be truthful, in the eyes of Bet365, those guys over there do have Green Bay as the 1.5 point favorite. So it actually presents another very, very interesting situation where there's not necessarily an arbitrage opportunity available, but there are a couple really nice middling strategies that could be utilized. Starting with the spread, taking Green Bay at DraftKings at plus 1.5 and Arizona at plus 1.5 on Bet365 allows an opportunity for both bets to win if the game is decided by exactly 1 point either way. So you'd put however much down to gain X on DraftKings. You'd bet Y in order to get that same amount on Bet365. So the total amount that you would lose would be relatively limited. But there is the profound upside of winning both choices in a 1 point game, which we've never seen happen in an IFL National Championship before. The closest we got to that scenario was 2 points as the margin of victory in the Quad City Northern Arizona title game in 2022. But hey, if a game goes overtime or late in regulation, the decision to go for 2 instead of the tying extra point, there are paths available to this game getting decided by just 1 point. On the point total standpoint in terms of middling, take the over here on DraftKings, take the under at Bet365. Pretty much the same reasoning, where you would actually win both those picks if the game ends with anywhere between 95 and 98 points. So that actually offers a 4 point sweet cushion to get a really, really big payout without having to risk all that much. So that's a little bit of my pick for this game, a little bit of strategy involving some line shopping. But yeah, my pick here, I'm going Arizona minus 1.5. And again, they've covered in 6 straight games. They play to their championship form that they have proved historically that they can. No reason why they can't make it 7 straight covers. A little bit of a look at the same game parlay matrix here to close out the night. A lot of these numbers still make sense based on last week's conversation. So any outcome involving Arizona being successful probably leans more towards the under, though interestingly the under paired with Arizona money line pays it slightly more than Arizona with the over. Despite the under outcome happening 8 times versus 5 for Rattlers wins this season. The same deal applies to the Green Bay side of things, where there's a slightly higher payout potential for the over than the under if you took Green Bay on the money line. So insane value there at that plus 296 if you want to take it. But yeah, that's going to wrap things up here. IFL National Championship can be viewed on Yahoo Sports at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 Pacific on Sunday the 16th. You can either go to yahoosports.tv for that, or you can look up Yahoo Sports 24/7 channel on YouTube. So for those who want the OG YouTube viewing experience, you've got that option as well. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in at really any point this season. It's certainly been an enjoyable and a memorable one. We still have one crown jewel to witness and behold, though, and that's going to be on Sunday night. So don't miss it. It's going to be great. And yeah, thanks so much for hopping on. If you're going to try some predictions this week, I wish you the best. And as always, I'll see you at the cashier.